Okay, today we're going to look at 10 things that you can look at when you're writing about structure in your AQA English Language Paper 1 Question 3. It's quite a tough question because structural things sometimes don't seem so obvious, do they? You kind of need to look beneath the surface at how a text is ordered or developed or built up. I'm going to give you 10 things though that you can hopefully find in the text you get in the exam. Number 1. How does it start? Does the writer introduce you to a character or a setting in the first paragraph? If so, don't say the writer sets the scene, because the examiner won't like that kind of expression. Instead, make exactly the same point using a more complicated word. Write about how the writer creates a sense of orientation in the first paragraph by describing a character or setting. Number 2, look at the first 2 or 3 paragraphs and look at what they focus on. If you had to sum up each paragraph with a little subheading, what would it be? In fact, why not write these in the margin when you're reading through the text? And then pick out a few interesting examples and try to explain how the writer focuses us on one character or setting and then shifts the reader's focus onto something else. If you think the writer is focusing on the big picture and then zooming in on something smaller, maybe you could say that they are narrowing our focus or widening our focus. 3. How are those shifts in focus, how are they being signposted? Does the writer use any temporal or spatial connectives? Some useful subject terminology that you can use there that will push your mark up. These are the little phrases you're likely to find at the beginning of paragraphs to show that shift. So a temporal adverb would be something to do with time, like 2 hours later, or later that afternoon. A spatial adverbial will be something like inside the cafe, or beyond the wall. So look out for them and explain how these phrases, these adverbials, act as markers or signposts in the narrative. Number 4. Where are the narrative hooks? These are the moments, often at the beginning of a text, that engage your attention. Maybe making you wonder what's going to happen next. What are the consequences of someone's actions going to be? Anything that hooks you in at the beginning of a text and makes you read on until you've got the answer. A narrative hook. Number 5. You could also, of course, look at how the extract ends. Maybe it's the end of a chapter. And if so, does it use some kind of cliffhanger? Something that will make you turn over the page and start the next chapter. Number 6. This is one of the most likely things you're going to be able to spot. Where does the writer create tension? Where are you left feeling a bit of fear? Where does the mood or the atmosphere change? How has the writer achieved this? Have they used maybe short sentences to build up the tension? Or is it the use of particular imagery or other language techniques that creates that? As long as you're saying how these are important at this point in the narrative to create tension or to create a particular mood, you can be touching on language but still making a structural point because you're talking about how that's effective at this point in the narrative. 7. Is there any dialogue, any speech, that means? If so, look at why it's used when it is. The writer won't have just used it for the sake of it. Does the dialogue change the atmosphere or the way that you see a particular character, maybe? Does it increase the tension or maybe create humour? Maybe someone who's present in the setting, in the situation, maybe someone is silent. And if so, what effect does that have? Or maybe they dominate the conversation for a long period of the text. Or maybe they're the one that's asking all the questions whereas someone else is answering them. So what effect does the dialogue have? Number 8, is the story being narrated chronologically, in time order, or are there flashbacks? Look carefully for this, and if there are flashbacks to something that happened earlier, try to work out why the writer might have done this. 9, look for cohesion. This just means looking at the ways that a text is stuck together or tied together. Are there some images that link things together? Or does something at the end of the text link back to something at the beginning? If so, we can say that that creates a sense of cohesion, or it makes the text cohesive. And finally, number 10, look for contrast. You will always find contrast. Where does the atmosphere change? Which two characters maybe are presented as complete opposites? Which two paragraphs are completely different in terms of the emotions they elicit from you as a reader? Which sections of the text contrast in terms of tone or setting or sentence structure? Look for contrast. You will always find contrast. Find that contrast and you're making a structural point. Now, I've used lots of subject terminology over the last 5 minutes or so. Don't be afraid to use it. It will boost your mark. If you cop out and you try to find simpler ways of saying the same points that I've made, you won't impress the examiner as much. So use all these terms because you get marks for using that subject terminology. If you found that useful, then like it, share it, and subscribe to English Gorillas.